Right before our very eyes, a massive geopolitical shift is completely reshaping the global AI sector. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the exact data driving what's known as the Chinese open weight strategy. So let's just dive right into it. Section 1. Two AI strategies, civilizational answers. Okay, picture this. It's July 2026, and two vastly different philosophies just violently collide. On one hand, you have the West. They're essentially building a wall around intelligence with OpenAI's historic $1 trillion IPO. Their whole strategy is built on selling scarcity, charging rent for API access. But then, literally just 6 weeks later on the other side of the globe, the East makes its move. Chinese company Moonshot AI drops KIMI K3, a massive 2.8 trillion parameter model, and they release it entirely for free. Their strategy? Handing out the keys to the street and intentionally trying to collapse that very rent-based monopoly.
Section 2. The day price broke. To really understand this, we have to jump back a bit to January 27, 2025. This was the real shockwave. The DeepSeek project released R1. This was an incredibly cheap reasoning model that actually matched OpenAI's best stuff, and investors completely panicked. They assumed cheap intelligence meant fewer chips would be needed, and that wiped out $600 billion of NVIDIA's value in a single day, the largest one-day drop in history. Now, hindsight is 20/20, and the data shows they totally missed the mark. Compute demand actually exploded, and NVIDIA bounced right back. But the real earthquake here, it wasn't in silicon. It was the absolute total collapse in the price of artificial intelligence itself.
And the true impact of that price collapse hit global market share fast, and it hit hard. By May 2026, Chinese open-weight models had utterly devoured the landscape. They were handling a staggering 61% of all traffic on OpenRouter. Meanwhile, Google's share plummeted down to 13%, and Meta's Llama, which used to be the undisputed open-source champion, collapsed to under 1%. The East had literally redrawn the map of global model dominance.
Which brings us to a massive, almost unbelievable geopolitical irony. An estimated 80%, 80% of US AI startups are currently building their products on top of Chinese open-weight models. Despite all the political tensions, despite all the trade restrictions, this is the undeniable reality the data shows us right now.
To really grasp the sheer scale of this shift, just look at Alibaba's Quinn family. It quietly surpassed 1 billion cumulative downloads. 1 billion. It actually overtook Llama to become the most remixed model in history, spawning 70% of all new derivative models out there. Literally, without making a fuss, China just became the default foundational substrate for global AI development.
Section 3. The open weight doctrine. Named and explained.
So, what's the geometry behind all this? It actually relies on 4 core pillars. First up, you commoditize the software layer to intentionally devalue the West's heavily guarded hardware moat. Second, you use price, not just performance benchmarks, but actual cost as a weapon. Third, you set up an ecosystem division of labor, where different players specialize in different niches. And fourth, distribution compounds. Freeways spawn derivatives, and those quickly become the industry standards. Giving away this tech, it isn't an act of charity, not at all. It's a highly calculated structural response to export controls.
You can see this pricing weapon in action perfectly right here. Look at this. DeepSeek V4 Pro gives you near-frontier capabilities for just 1/12 the price of GPT 5.5. 1/12! And similarly, Moonshot K2.5 comes in at just 1/7 the cost of Claude Opus. By offering top-tier capacity at a mere fraction of the expected cost, they're completely disrupting and reframing Western corporate budgets.
Section 4. K3, the new flagship. And this brings us to the absolute heaviest artifact in this doctrinal warfare, KIMI K3. It is a 2.8 trillion parameter behemoth. We're talking about the largest open-weight model ever released into the public domain. It features a massive 1 million token context window, and it's not just big for the sake of being big. It ranks #1 in autonomous web research and front-end coding. The cost? $3. Just $3 per million input tokens. This represents, without a doubt, the greatest single transfer of frontier-class capability to the public in history.
But honestly, what's truly staggering about Moonshot AI is their execution speed. Over just 12 months, they escalated from K2 all the way to the massive K3. That's 4 major open-source releases in a single calendar year. The logic driving this is simple, but absolutely ruthless. If you can't outspend your competitor, you just outship them.
Meanwhile, the Western response has been noticeably muted. OpenAI pushed out one open model in 2025 and then basically went silent to protect its upcoming IPO. Meta pivoted back to closed models. Now, this isn't a lack of technical skill on their part, it's just that they are structurally handcuffed. The dominant Western business model simply requires scarcity to justify its massive revenues.
Section 5. The physics floor. Hardware limitations.
Now, this strategy isn't magic. It does have a hard floor, and it's built out of physics. While the weights in the code are entirely free, actually running inference on a 2.8 trillion parameter model requires heavily rationed silicon, massive amounts of power, and high bandwidth memory, or HBM. So the recipe might be free to download, but the kitchen remains strictly embargoed, which definitely caps the East's advanced packaging output.
It's a constant high-stakes game of cat and mouse. The open-weight doctrine and U.S. export controls basically act like photographic negatives of each other. For example, when the U.S. closed an offshore compute loophole on May 31, 2026, the East immediately adapted its strategy. Every single move forces a counter-move.
Section 6. The battle for the future.
Looking at the scoreboard as we head into 2027, a very clear division has formed. The West has successfully held on to the highly profitable closed premium layer, basically the metered utility for complex enterprise tasks. But the East, they've completely captured the world's default layer. These open models are ubiquitous right now, powering startups, students, and autonomous agents across the entire globe.
You know, we've actually seen this exact movie before with smartphones. Think iOS versus Android. The closed premium player kept the massive profit margins? Absolutely. But the open player ultimately took the world. The profound difference this time around? The operating system we're talking about is human cognition itself.
Which leaves us with one massive lingering question. If the West builds a $1.4 trillion wall to collect rent on intelligence, and the East hands out the keys to that exact same intelligence for free, what happens to the wall when the rent stops being worth paying? I'll leave you to think about that. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. See you next time.